Čiže musím znovu začať teda, hej? Hello everybody, this is 49th Mitropa Cup from Trenčín, Slovakia, round 5, and my name is Igor Stoll, and I will be streaming for you today's games. I'm a grandmaster from Slovakia, and I'm a trainer of the Slovakian women's team. And for this reason, not only for this reason, I'm also a proud father of 2 daughters. We'll start with the ladies' games first. And we have an important match here between Switzerland and France. These are the teams which are topping the tournament table currently, and the winner of this match will continue to do so. So let's have a look at the 4 games from Switzerland, France. Okay, this is board 1. Negre against Manco. We have a Sicilian defense, but it's a rather closed system. As you see, white didn't play d4. Actually, white started with knight c3, knight c6, knight f3, and now black played e5, which leads to a closed position in the center with some tension. White controls the light squares and is trying to maneuver his knight to e3 to increase his control of the critical d5 square. Well, but this in the end, it didn't work out so great, because after d5, black has managed to get in the important central push, and in my opinion the position is quite equal. Black has managed to solve his opening problems and shouldn't have any serious worries here, I would say. Position is quite fine for black. Let's move on to the game on board 2 with Hryzlova playing with white against Cyril Montpeux. King's Indian. Complicated King's Indian position. The fianchetto line. Hryzlova likes to fianchetto her light squared bishop. She usually plays the Catalan or the King's Indian with g3. In this case it was the King's Indian, and her opponent played an untypical system here. b6 at this point, definitely this is not standard, but it's a modern wrinkle, a modern twist here. Usually in the King's Indian, the black c8 bishops is looking for its future on the diagonal c8 h3. Here the bishop goes to b7. This is not really typical, because black later on, to control the d5 square, has to play sooner or later c6. She played it sooner. Now a6 is with the idea b5. Black wants to push b5, and white stops this with a4. So white has a space advantage here, but black position is flexible, and it's not so easy to convert this space advantage. Also, a4 is such a move that it also weakens some squares on the queen side. Black could react now with a5. That's a possible reaction, which gets black this nice c5 square for the knight. I don't know. We'll wait and see what happens. I would say white is slightly better here, but the whole game is ahead. So a5 didn't happen. Did it happen already? No. It's just my proposal. We'll see what black will play. On board 3 we have Kornilov fighting with Hakimifard. Hakimifard is a player from Iran who's now representing Switzerland for the past couple of years already. At the last Mitropa Cup in 2024, she actually played board 1. But now her younger compatriots, Rizlova and Manko, are on the top 2 boards. And here we have an interesting Nimzo-Indian defense. Bishop b4, and white plays a sharp system with a3, forcing black to exchange the bishop, but white is ready to, is willing to accept the disruption of her pawn structure to build up a strong center and attempt to attack black's king. Actually, castling is a bit too committal. I think c5 is the standard move here. But okay, now this line has been developing currently, and after f3, c5, I would say this gives white a little bit of a free hand in the center. Perhaps this might be dangerous for black. No. Knight c6. Okay, now immediately bishop g5. This pin could be dangerous, but white has to reckon with queen a5, with the counterattack against the c3 pawn. So I don't know what white plans to do, but he's definitely going to develop some of his minor pieces, and perhaps he can even develop his rook by playing rook a2 and then advancing the pawns on the king side. Rook a2 followed by g4 h4. The rook from a1 may join the attack on the king side without even finishing the development, without even castling or anything like that. This is currently quite a modern and popular plan. But okay, we'll see what the French girl intends to play in this position after knight c6. And let's go on to game number 4. This is the first game Gundula Heinatz is playing. The Swiss reserve is playing on board 4. And they play the Catalan. White sacrificed the pawn for, I would say, rather substantial pressure. All this is well known. dc4, queen c2, b5. Now a4 is the standard reaction, but Heinatz played rook d1 instead. She's in no hurry. And now she doesn't take on c6, which eases black's development, and plays b3 instead. And here white plays bishop a3. Now white has excellent control of the dark squares. So if white's knight lands on c5, it will be quite difficult for black to free themselves. And I would say black should be glad to give up his c6 pawn. If he manages to do so soon enough and in an advantageous fashion, he might be able to equalize. I mean, knight bd7. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Knight bd7 is a move which gives up the c6 pawn. Black is willing to give back his extra pawn, but finish his development and shake off the pressure on the c file. So this is probably the best continuation here. And okay, I was pretty excited about white's chances. Okay, after knight bd7, it's not so clear. It's probably quite okay for black, in fact. Okay, let's pass on to the other matches. The following match is played by my team, so here I'm a bit biased, of course, and but I can tell you that our preparation for the match, there are some positions, in quite a few games there are positions we didn't look at in the pre-match preparation. So this is board 1. In this match, both team captains, myself and Zbigniew Gracek, who captains the Czech ladies, decided to give a rest to the most experienced and oldest players. So there's 4 young girls on both sides playing. The oldest participant of the match, I think, is about 22, and they're playing it out in quite complex positions. So this is a really sideline of the English defense in which black occupies the center. Bishop g2, I think, is not the most accurate. I think white should pay more attention to the e4 pawn and try to cut it off. I mean, d5 is a move which is played more often and is perhaps more promising, because after bishop g2, d5, if white doesn't manage to get rid of the e4 pawn, the bishop on g2 is simply blocked, hemmed in. But on the other hand, black's center is under pressure. So Bochnichkova with black decided to give up her dark squared bishop. White now controls the dark squares, and it's a question of if black manages to hold the center, if black manages to hold this pawn chain, c6, d5, e4, then she's doing fine. If white somehow takes on d5, then plays c4, gradually exchanges black's central pawns and herself gains advantage in the center, then she can be better. Well, we'll see how the game will develop. Let's move on to the following game. Well, this is only a few opening moves here. Also an IMSO-Indian defense, but slightly different than in the France-Switzerland match. Knight f3, castles. Okay, this is theory, this is move 4. Black's move is a question of taste. There are other moves, b6, c5, they're all playable, and so is castles. Bishop g5, h6, this is all fine. Here the main move is definitely c5. White's bishop has left the queen side, and now black gets chances to attack c3. He has this sortie queen a5, that's in the air already, queen a5. And this leads to a very complex position, which is, let's say, approximately equal. d5 is not ideal. White continues development with e3, and this pin of the knight on f6, it's quite annoying. I mean, getting rid of the pin with g5 really seriously weakens the king side, and white is only 2 moves away from castling, from playing something like bishop d3 and castling. So white has some chances to get out of the opening with at least a slight advantage. On board 2. On board 3, we have again 2 young players. Sekova is the youngest from our Slovakian team. She's 16 years old, but she has actually the highest rating from the team. And they are playing the King's Indian, a symmetrical line, which somehow knight c6. Well, white is a tempo up. I mean, these symmetrical lines are rather dangerous, because once the symmetry ends and black can't follow white, then he might get into trouble. I mean, it's in black's interest, mainly in black's interest, to finish the symmetry earlier on. But I don't think this is the case. Here, actually, bishop e6 is a good move for black. It's fully playable. Queen a5 is another alternative. Now white has 2 moves which come into account. One is queen b3, and the other one is bishop d2. The bishop moves away from e3, but white creates the threat knight d5, the positional threat, I mean. So this is a plausible move, but I think maybe white can also try to play knight d5. This is also an option. So white has a slight initiative here in a symmetrical position. It might later evaporate, but if black doesn't continue accurately, this initiative might grow into something more serious. Okay, let's check Game number 4, and here we have a Caro-Kann. e4, c6, knight f3, and now knight c3. The two knights line. Here the most usual move here is bishop g4. Bishop g4, h3, bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, e6. White has two bishops, but the position in the center is closed. Caro-Kann is a semi-closed opening, and it's not so easy to profit from the strength of the bishops. I mean, this might show in the future, in the middle game. Black took on e4, and now a fashionable line is knight f6. Currently, they have come to understand that the extra pawn in the center, in fact, is not so much of a large advantage, and that these positions are quite playable for black. To such extent that white in this position, more usually than taking on f6, he reacts with queen e2. And this is why actually after bishop f5, Sankova also played queen e2. It's connected with the nasty, cheap trick knight d7, knight d6 mate. Of course, this is not going to happen at this level. So black played e6. But what I wanted to say is bishop f5 is a slight inaccuracy. The right way to go is knight g3. And contrary to the main Caro-Kann line in which white has played d4 instead of knight f3, now bishop g6, bishop g4 is stronger. But then white plays h3, and I will gain the bishop pair, and I'm slightly better. And bishop g6 is worse because I play h4. Okay, you don't want to lose the bishop. h6, knight e5, and here white already puts black under serious pressure with queen f3, or maybe even bishop c4. I'm not so sure what's the strongest move here. I'm winning tempos. I mean, e6. I can play even queen h5, threatening mate on f7, and it's. Black can defend, but he has to put his pieces on really passive squares, and this is not ideal. Here white gets a really nasty pull and advantage. So queen e2 is not the ideal move. e6, d3, h6. Okay, this frees the h7 square for the bishop, but we are in the opening, so it's certainly more usual to develop pieces. Bishop f4, making it more difficult for black to play knight d7, because white then has knight d6 check, which probably black shouldn't allow. Okay, white has comfortable position with slightly better development, somewhat more space, but black's defenses are solid. I mean, there is a whole game ahead of us, and it's really difficult to say something far-reaching about this match. So let's continue to match number 3, and that's between Italy and Slovenia. Slovenia has only 4 players here. They are nominally the weakest team, and they are the underdogs in this match, because the Italians, on the other hand, have the second strongest team. But the Italians have already, I think they've lost already 2 matches, and they're not doing so well. They lost against Switzerland, they lost against France, and they're performing a bit below their expectations. So on board 1 we have a matchup between Caesar and Brunello. Brunello is an experienced grandmaster who has played many Olympiads and the European Team Championships for Italy, and they played something like a Queen's Gambit, I see. Original system with h6. I mean, it's current fashion. Black puts the bishop to a more active square on d6 instead of e7. And to safeguard themselves against this pin, bishop g5, he inserts h6. Well, original as it is, I think white managed to get quite a comfortable position from the opening. I'm not saying about the two bishops, but black's pawn structure, he has this double pawn on the d file, and this is a permanent drawback. On the other hand, black has play on the semi-open files. Rook on c8, rook on e8. I think the next move from black will probably be at some point rook e8 right now. The knight comes to e4. So black is trying to compensate his inferior pawn structure with piece play. Well, sharp fight is ahead. I mean, Brunello is a favorite, but the position is very complex, and we can hardly say anything more conclusive about this. Okay, the same goes for the following game. Here the Italian player is white. Zimina against Beber, she played a very solid system with white, not too ambitious. I mean, black has managed to equalize from the opening. Knight bd2 certainly is not a standard line. The more normal move is c4, knight c3. But okay, this is a typical position which resembles the hedgehog structure, and black has managed to develop his pieces harmoniously without creating too many weaknesses, and can also count on equality, on gradually equalizing. I mean, if white doesn't play e4, then black herself, she might push in d5 in the center. She might play d5 in the near future, leading to a symmetrical position. So this is a position which I would say is about equal. White's advantage is minimal at this point, and with careful play, black should be able to neutralize it. Okay, here we have the matchup on board 3. The Slovenian player Maček is playing against Elena Sedina. Sedina is the most experienced and the oldest of the Italian players. She's originally from Russia, but has been living in Italy for the past 20 plus years, and has already played for Italy on many team championships. And she played against once again, this is the same line, or a very similar line to what Brunello played, the Queen's Gambit with h6, playing something original. a6, also a useful move. The idea behind a6 is to take on c4 and then develop the problematic c8 bishop with b5 and bishop b7. White prevents this with b3. Now white is willing to take on c4 back with the pawn, of course, and black played c5. cd4, knight d5, knight d2. Okay, white has a slight lead in development. I mean, black played two moves, a6, h6, two pawn moves instead of developing moves. So white has a slight plus without too much risk. Black still has to finish her development, and it could be a problem. I mean, white could develop quite an initiative here. And what do we have on board 4? Teageci is playing with white, and against, this is, I think, the Slovenian board 4 is, Slovenians have only 4 players, and she's the youngest participant. She is about 10 or 11 years old. While Geci is an experienced international master, and this is a very difficult game for Emma Yaksha. The Rui Lopez, standard opening, h3, played against the pin, bishop g4, and now the system which is going to be played in this game, there are more than one, there are various systems, is defined by black's 9th move. Knight b8 is the Breyer, then bishop b7 is the Zaitsev. The oldest system bears the name of the Russian grandmaster Chigorin, a player who played with Steinitz 2 matches for the World Championship in the second half of the 19th century. He used to play this system, but okay, it's not so popular nowadays, but it still remains rather solid, and white blockades the center. This is one of the most testing lines. The pawn structure actually resembles the King's Indian, but the plans are altogether different. Here white still plays in the center, he plays on the king's side because all his pieces are directed in the direction of the center and king side, and black with his pawns advanced on the queen side. Usually the pawn on d5 means that white has a space advantage on the queen side, but here it's difficult to imagine white developing some meaningful activity on the queen side. And actually what happened after a couple of moves, well here this is not really too good. c4. This doesn't work tactically. bc4, ba4, now c5, central break. And if black takes with the pawn, then white simply takes the pawn on a4. And he has black has 3 pawn islands, has only isolated and weak pawns on the queen side, which is definitely to white's advantage. But this is also a problem. Knight takes e5. Tactics. Now if black takes, then bishop a3, and after queen c7 follows fork. Well, bishop takes d6 loses an exchange, and otherwise white will take on e7, will have a strong passed pawn and large advantage. I mean, let's just check it with the computer. Computer is very satisfied. Computer gives white a large advantage. But it's the same case is also after knight fd7. Now white's knight jumps to c6, and black's queen is also in trouble with bishop a3 following. Of course, this bishop on e7 is attacked. And once the bishop goes away, then bishop a3 looks like it's winning material. I would say white is close to winning here. Already the computer indicates something like +4. So the best which black can achieve is that she will lose only the pawn on d6 after bishop f6, bishop a3. So in this game, black is in big trouble already straight out of the opening. Let's go on to the following match, which is between Germany and Croatia. On board 1, Basilina is playing against Berke. And here we have again a Queen's Gambit, an orthodox declined Queen's Gambit. And white exchanged on d5, the so-called Karlsbad pawn structure. And black played in the modern fashion with bishop d6, not playing defensively with bishop e7, which is more standard. This bishop d6 is interesting. Although the follow-up, I would say it's not ideal from black's point of view. Now, usually black plays something like a5 and knight a6, and then develops the knight to a6, c7, and e6. Bishop e6, I don't really like this move so much. I mean, the bishop can get in the way. We'll see it in the game. White decided to punish bishop e6 quite radically with f4. This is, of course, a double-edged move because it creates also a weakness on e3. But white controls the e4 square, and she can rather easily also protect the e3 pawn. So, on the other hand, it would be much better to get this set up with the knight on f3, which could then jump to e5. Knight f8, okay, queen d2. Well, this pin is annoying. I mean, black can't play knight g6 because white will take on f6 and play f5. That's a fork, winning a piece. And moving the queen, allowing bishop takes f6 is certainly not ideal. So it's quite probable that black will have to lose a tempo to get rid of the pin, to play something like bishop e7. And then the whole plan with bishop d6 doesn't work. I would say white is better here. White is better, and black has to fight for equality. Bishop e7 seems to be the best move. Maybe I've overestimated white's position, but it certainly seems more pleasant. to be. Okay, on board 2 we have Ivekovic with white playing against Svenja Butenandt. And we have the Caro-Kann here. We already had one Caro-Kann in the previous games. Here white played a simple system which has become popular currently. The exchange. And this is, as we had in the previous game, this is the Carlsbad structure, but with opposite colors. It is as if white was playing Queen's Gambit with black, and white in the previous game, white exchanged on d5. Here, white also exchanges on d5, but it is the position with opposite colors. Carlsbad structure, bishop f5, queen b3, and now white starts to chase black's bishop. And she gets a bishop pair, but black's position remains very solid. And it's not so easy to open up the position for the bishops. So I would say the position is roughly equal. And the game is still quite complicated and the outcome totally open. I would prefer putting my bishop to g2. And then perhaps if white gets to play c4, developing some pressure along the long h1 a8 diagonal. I mean, this certainly looks more logical. But Tihana prefers bishop e2, which is also pretty solid. Now both sides finished their development. Both sides have already safeguarded their king. They've castled queen side both, and there is a complex game ahead of us. Black's position is solid. The game is, I would say, it's about equal. So let's go on to the following game between Trunz and Anna Maria Radikovic. This is also an original position. One wouldn't say that this came out from the Nimzo Indian. So let's check how all this happened. White played the Rubinstein system with e3. Okay, knight e2, bishop e7, and now black is unwilling to exchange the bishop. Here white would take with the knight. She doesn't have to disrupt her pawn structure, and gets the two bishops and potentially some advantage in the middle game. So black decides to invest the tempo and retreats her bishop. After all, the knight on e2 is not positioned so great. Now white must find a way to continue the development of the king side. So she did it with d5. She's closing the long diagonal, a8, h1. The knight will go somewhere to f4 or g3, and then white can proceed with developing the bishop. Or white can play even g3 and bishop g2. Castles and knight f4 is what happened. And she decided to advance the pawn. Well, this is always quite double-edged. I mean, the pawn gets on the enemy half of the board, and the question is it going to cramp white or is it going to be a weakness? Well, we will see. White is not resigned to getting cramped. g4. Attacking, this is all directed against the e4 pawn. The threat is g5 and then taking on e4. d6. Well, after g5 the g pawn will be hanging, so bishop g2. The pawn is attacked. a5. Now let me see, I have to try to understand why white doesn't want to take on e4. It's not so simple. What's going to happen after knight e4? Possibly white could have done it. Maybe she was worried about knight e4, bishop e4, and then bishop g5. Attacking the bishop, and the bishop can't retreat because bishop takes f4. But white can play queen f3, protecting both the knight and the bishop. So I think possibly she could have gone for the pawn capture. Well, after a5. And what happened in the game was rook b1. And black continued a4. Now a4, this gives white a choice to take either the pawn on a4 or the pawn on e4. I'm sort of at a loss to understand what's going on here. Well, it looks good for white in any case. This e4 pawn is more of a burden than a strength, and black hasn't opened the center and hasn't even somehow coordinated her pieces, finished her development. So here white can cash in on the material, and I don't see sufficient compensation. So let's run on to game number 4. And here we have another Caro-Kann, but this is not a typical one, because after knight f3 black played g6. And she's trying to combine Caro-Kann with a modern defense, d4, bishop g7. Okay, this is also possible, but white occupies the center. Bishop g4. Well, this is the so-called bad bishop. I mean, it's limited by the pawns on the white squares. I don't know if I would be so willing to exchange it immediately, which is what happened in the game in a short while. Now, after h3, actually white took. Black took on f3. Well, white has 2 bishops and rather straightforward and easy development. So I would say white has an advantage here. White has a pleasant position, and white's center is quite solid, and this means that we can attack on the flanks. And white started this with h4. h4, h5, this is pretty dangerous. Black reacted with queen d7. Well, now logical follow-up is h5, after which black will play g5. So this maybe white can prepare it, maybe white can castle queenside or something like that. White is better here. White has better chances. Okay, let's continue on to the last match. And the last match is between Austria and Hungary. We have already 15 moves here in the game on board 1 between Frövis and Terbe. And they played the Scotch, an open game, and actually not the classical Scotch with knight takes d4, but the Scotch gambit. Well, black is willing to give the pawn back, and this is a theoretical position. Knight d7, earlier they used to play only knight e4. Knight d7 is currently quite popular. The idea is quite surprising. The knight hits for b8. After bishop takes c6, b takes c6, which didn't happen in the game. It happened later, so I will show you later what happened. Rook e1. Now white took on d4, and black plays knight b8. Knight is safely placed. It's not exposed on e4 or somewhere. White is not able to kick it around. And black prepares c5, bishop b7. Black wants to make his bishop pair work. So what white does is she halves the bishop pair. She plays queen f3, and after c5, bishop knight f5, which forces black to give up one of those bishops. I mean, if either white takes on e7 or black herself takes knight c6, and the knight is heading, black's knight is now heading for e6. First, black has to play c6. I think this is quite satisfactory for black. Although she has a doubled pawn, but the structure is quite flexible. Knight goes to e6, then black can advance pawns with c4, d4, can even try to exchange the advanced e5 pawn with f6. Black is doing fine here. But I don't know if it's already black has an advantage or something like that. That's a bit too early to say. b3 is a good move, because now, even if the knight goes to e6, black won't be able to play c4 to put these pawns on light squares, which she would gladly do with the dark squared bishop. This is the ideal combination. Bishop on light squares, pawns on dark squares, or the other way around. So let's get on to game on board 2. Here is the other Terbe sister, this time playing with white against Lisa Happala, and we have a Nimzo Indian once again. with queen c2, which is a popular line, so-called classical Nimzo-Indian. d5, takes, castles, bishop g5. Now, the most popular move is, I think, d takes c4, followed by queen c4, b6, and black is developing his bishop to either to b7 or a6, according to the circumstances. h6, c5 is a pawn sacrifice. It's sharp, but okay, it seems playable. As far as I know, it's playable, and it's a sort of very testing line. It's difficult to play for both sides. Rook e8, knight f3, and now queen e7. And black is already ready to play something like d3. And after taking on d3, e4 is a fork, and it wins a piece. So after b4, for example, black would gladly play d3. And once taking on d3 loses a piece, the bishop on f1 will stay hemmed in. So I don't know what white should do here. If she can castle queenside, perhaps, or play something like rook d1. The computer indicates rook d1, but doesn't give white an advantage. I mean, this is here black has probably already solved the opening problems. Let's continue to board 3. Cutter against Toth. And we have once again a King's Indian with g3, or something resembling. It's more of a Grinfeld, because black plays d5, c4, c6, the symmetrical Grinfeld. Now cd5 is equal and rather boring. Queen b3 is more testing, but queen b6 is, as far as I know, this is the best reaction. Knight c3. Now black could have held on the center with rook d8. Rook d8, I think, is the standard move in this position. Black decided to give up the center. Now white has a position which resembles the Slav defense. I mean, black can develop her bishop freely on the diagonal c8 h3 because there is no pawn on e6. But still, white has a slight advantage in the center and can hope for maybe a slight pull. c5, okay. Black wants to win more space, and rook d1. I want to exchange these pawns, but at my conditions. I mean, if you play cd4, then knight d4. Attacking the bishop on e6, freeing the long diagonal, g2, a8. If black would like to develop the b8 knight, but where? I mean, can black play knight c6 now, and after d5 knight b4? That's an open question. If this is possible, then black's position is probably okay. If knight c6 d5 is a problem, then the whole position is rather suspect for black. Knight bd7, white can play d5, bishop f5, e4. This is certainly not ideal, giving white tempi to advance the central pawns. So it all depends on whether knight c6 is a viable option. And the engine is in favor of knight c6, actually. It says that knight c6 is the move black should play in this position. So if it works tactically, that's often the case. If it works tactically, then strategically it's okay. The relationship between strategy and tactics in chess is a very complex one. And the last game, and the last ladies' game from the last match, is in board 4 between Suljok and Deaksala. Both Hungarian names, by the way, but Deaksala is an Austrian player, one who's been making quite a lot of progress lately. And they played something like the Reti here. Now, if white would play d4, we would have the same line as in the previous game. But white played in a more restrained manner, d3, castles, knight bd2. Now, actually interesting, I've always been in favor, when I played black in this position, I used to play d4. which is an interesting move. Black occupies some central space, then proceeds to develop freely with knight c6, perhaps continues with e5, given the chance. c5 is also possible, of course. Here the standard move is definitely e4. c4, this is a bit strange with the knight on d2. I mean, with the knight on d2, one usually pushes the e pawn. And black doesn't react, doesn't push d4. She played knight c6. Queen a4 and only now d4. This looks quite okay for black. I mean, white... Now white would be better off with the knight on b1 and then following by the development to a3 and c2. And somehow supporting the pushes e3 and b4. Here, she actually did this. She started to reposition her knight with knight b1. But black gained some tempting. I think black is quite okay here. Black is doing fine here. I mean, after a4, the queen has to go back to d1. Black is she has nothing to be worried about. Okay, so this is the first overview of the ladies' games. Let me check the time. I think we'll proceed to the men's games and then we will have a short break. So, I mean, I'm going to go here and we are in the open. Okay, this is from the match France against Switzerland. So Sebastian Bogner on board 1 is not playing. He's having a rest day today. And it's Peng Min playing board 1. This is once again the symmetrical Fianchetto-Grinfeld. So we will pass on the first moves. And here, as I said, cd5, this is pretty much symmetrical. Knight e4 is possibly the best reaction from black. Now, actually, black can play knight c6, and after knight c6, bc6, it's symmetrical, it's equal. Black played e6, which is an attempt to be more enterprising. I don't know if it's worth it, I mean, in such a position. e4, and now knight c6. Position might be equal even here, but I suspect that this e6, instead of knight c6, this gives needlessly gives white some extra chances. Okay, on board 2 we have Benziger playing against Willems. English opening. e6, and now bishop f4. Okay, g3 is a standard move. After that, black can continue bishop c5, queen b6. Loads of theory there. We won't go into too much detail. Bishop f4 is a playable move, which is not so thoroughly analyzed. And of course, the main reaction should be something like d5, but then white can continue simply with e3. He doesn't have to resolve the central tension. Or maybe he can take on d5 and then play something like knight b5. a6. This is directed against knight b5, but I think it's a bit passive. d6. Okay, now white felt compelled. Black threatens to take on d4 and win a piece with e5. So some reaction. White must react in some way. Maybe e3 is a normal move. e3, and after knight d4 I can take with the e pawn on d4. This looks more logical because e3 is a developing move. Instead, white exchanged on c6 and played g3. Okay, this also looks quite okay. e5, bishop d2, rook b8. The question is if after bishop g2, black is willing to play d5. I mean, occupy the center despite lagging in development. This could be risky. So maybe it's more reasonable to play some more solid move like queen c7 or so. Is white better here? I'm not so sure. I mean, maybe slightly so. But until now, always the computer has somehow misapproved of my evaluation. The computer gives white an advantage. Well, it's not such a big surprise because lead in development, slightly better pawn structure. White has some pressure. But okay, it's move 11 and there is a whole game ahead of us. Well, here we have a Ruy Lopez, and this is a very untypical line. A6, bishop a4, b5 immediately. Knight f6 is standard, of course. But here, black, instead of continuing his development, he chases the white's bishop. The obvious drawback is that white gets a lead in development and can push in the center. I mean, d4 is a move. Even bishop d5, c6, bishop takes f7 is a more dangerous version of the sacrifice than taking on f7 immediately. But d4 is the most testing move in this position, definitely. Castling d6, on the other hand, is not so clear. And the reason is, if white now plays d4, black is not forced to take. I can take on b3 and play f6. And I can try to hold on to the e5 point till I finish development. I'm not going to open the game being behind in development, and once I do finish my development, somehow coordinate my pieces, consolidate my position, then I might profit from the bishop pair. c3 seems a bit too passive. Okay, now black must take, of course, because the bishop would retreat to c2. Bishop f6, attacking the e4 pawn. Bishop b7, attacking the e4 pawn again. This looks very much okay for black. I mean, black is not so much behind in development. If white plays some move like d3, black just proceeds with bishop e7, castles. He has two bishops, he has a comfortable position, and is doing quite fine. Opening the center, well, black is not so much ahead in development. I mean, black lacks only two moves to finish his development and castle and safeguard his king. So after d4, I can take on d4, I can play bishop e7. Even here, black is very much okay, I think. So white was not prepared for this knight a5 line and didn't play in the most principled fashion here. Let's pass on to board number 4, where we have a Sicilian. And this is the classical Sicilian with knight, no Najdorf. Najdorf would be with a6 instead of knight c6. Here we have knight c6. Bishop g5 is definitely the main move. e6, queen d2, a6. Now, castles queenside, bishop d7. There are loads and loads of theory. This is the Richter-Rauser system, very complicated. Perhaps white has a slight advantage. It's not so popular as the Sveshnikov and the Najdorf in the Sicilian. But still, I mean, getting an advantage here with white requires quite a lot of knowledge and energetic play, as usual in the Sicilian. Okay, f3 is possible. This indicates white is opting for a setup which resembles the English attack. f3 and then g4, h4. This is played, first it was played against the dragon. Then they started playing it in the Richter-Rauser. Normally, earlier they played lines with f2, f4, and white played for the central push, either e5 or f5. This English attack plan came later. Then later it came even in the Paulsen, in systems where black's pawn stays on d7 for quite some time. It's quite dangerous. In this line, for example, white probably will have to lose a tempo to get in g4, g5, because his bishop is on g5. But on the other hand, the knight is not so ideally placed on c6. In the Najdorf, the knight more often than not goes to d7. So what happened is bishop d7, but white still didn't castle here. And he played bishop e3. Black stops g4. Prophylaxis. And now I'm ready to put my knight to e5, and with the inserted pawn moves h4 and h5, after knight e5, if white kicks my knight with f4, it lands on a beautiful square on g4. So this is not so ideal for white. Anyway, castling queenside is logical. White decided to combine two systems, and occupies some space on the queen side, which is quite surprising, I would say. Now if black just simply finishes his development, he can play bishop e7 and castle king side. White will hardly castle with the pawn on a5, can hardly castle queen side. Even if I play knight b6 and knight b3 and protect the a5 pawn, then I'm not really willing to put my king on c1 or b1. So I don't really like too much the combination of h4 and a4 for white. I think this is a bit too much, but okay. I mean, I'm 60 years old, and chess has developed during my lifetime, and there are things which I don't simply understand. So this is quite possible. This is still a sharp fight ahead. So that's one match, and let's go on. The most interesting match actually is between the Slovak and Czech teams. The Czech team has won all its matches up till now. Slovakia has drawn one. So it's a match between the first and second team. Just like in the ladies, the French ladies are playing the Swiss ladies. Here the Czechs are playing the Slovaks for the lead in the tournament. So here we have Pechac with black, Finek against Pechac. And Pechac is the current Slovak #1, and Finek is a great Czech talent. I mean, a young boy, I think, well, he's about 15, 16. He's already over 2,500 rating, so a promising player for the national team. And they played a Catalan. Pechac chose a complicated system. To be honest, I don't know enough about this. I know this is playable for black, and black quite often gives up the c6 pawn to gain some initiative on the king side, connected with the advance of the h pawn. We'll see this in the game. Rook c1, rook b8. Okay. Now white has to react. He doesn't want to exchange the pawn, so he logically plays b3, h5. And a pretty direct plan. h4, h3. The h3 pawn is going to be a real thorn in white's neck. And if white plays h3 himself or plays h4, then he gives up g4 for black's pieces. So this advance of the h-pawn, advance of the rook pawn, this is really current fashion. I mean, this is something which is brought on by the newest generation of computers, by AlphaZero and its followers. It gives attacking chances. The advanced pawn can become very nasty, even in an endgame. Deep into the endgame, it will create problems on the basic rank and so on. So knight d2. Now he protected the c6 pawn for a while at least. White is maneuvering into position. h4. The queen gets over to the queen side. Of course, black is not interested in trading queens, because then white would have a better pawn structure and would have a slight advantage. Now g takes h4. Well, I must say that here, I mean, white has won a pawn, but not for long, I guess. Black can play something like queen h6. I will win the pawn back, and black has his chances on the king side. I mean, black's chances on the king side have not been somehow eradicated. Queen h6 or queen h7. I think black has a promising position here, with possibilities to attack the weakened king side position. So I'm not too thrilled with white's position here. From the Slovak viewpoint, it's quite promising. Okay, let's pass on to board 2. Neugebauer against Vikouk. Also, these are young players, both of them aspiring for the Grandmaster title. They already have Grandmaster ratings. They also have some GM norms. but still they have to fulfill the last norm or something like that. Both of them already had a rating over 2500, so this is not a problem. Vico currently lost a few points, but they're both on a high GM level. So what did we have here? We had an Italian game, a Gioco Piano, and white played d3. No knight g5, not these complicated lines with the pawn sacrifice. White is playing a maneuvering game. d6, a4, and black doesn't play g5 also, which might be possible, but of course it's quite double-edged and risky, and simply fianchettos the bishop. White pushes the a-pawn in the fashion as I mentioned in the previous game, to create some weaknesses, and he manages. Actually, I'm not so sure this is the ideal solution for black, to just ignore the pawn, because here black's queenside pawns are split, and I would say that white has a small but permanent positional advantage. Maybe not permanent, maybe long-term would be a better expression. So it's difficult to completely shake off white's pressure, I would say. Let's make a couple of moves here. Rook e1. Okay, white in the center, he remains passive. He doesn't take on d5, of course, to give black control of the center. Plays knight a5. And because of the a7, c6 pawns, I would say this is pleasant for white. Can continue b3, then bishop b2 or bishop a3. White is slightly better. So on the first two boards, I would say that Slovakia is doing pretty fine. Let's see what's happening on the other boards. Here we have Joachim Nemec, Czech player who until now he has 3 out of 3. He has 100%, also promising youngster. And the Slovak IM, Haring, also a guy who has at least one Grandmaster norm. He also had a rating over 2500. So another guy who is aspiring for the GM title. And of course, Joachim Nemec, I'm surprised. I think he's already an IM. He has probably already fulfilled all the requirements for the title, at least for the IM title. Or maybe he'll become directly a GM. So what's going on here? So this was no theoretical fight. I mean, b3, he decides to play for a middle game advantage. Here it's practically a matter of taste how black develops his forces. He can play e6, b6. Black decided to fianchetto his bishop, which is also, of course, fully acceptable. Both sides have somehow proceeded with their development, and now white occupies the central square. So is this pawn, if I exchange on e5, is this pawn going to be weak, or is it going to cramp black and give white chances for an advantage? Well, we'll see. I mean, I can challenge the knight. I can play some move like queen c7, trying to force some decision from white. If he takes on c6 or on d7, then the knight sortie wouldn't bring him anything concrete. So I would say queen c7 is the most natural response. Queen c7 is also what the computer says, and it gives the position as equal. I mean, white, as I said, white didn't play any topical, sharp theoretical line, played a maneuvering line, and until now hasn't managed to gain anything concrete, any long-lasting advantage from the opening. Let's get on to board 4. Here we have a Dutch defense. Black played f5. Okay, this is sharp, this is double-edged. This indicates that black wants to play for more than equality. He wants to play for a complex game with counterplay, counter chances. White plays an original system. Develops his bishop. Now if black starts chasing the bishop with h6, g5, he won't trap the bishop, but he will rather get mated somewhere on g6 or h5. G6 is a normal reaction. White played knight c3, d5, preventing e4. White proceeds with development, and so does black. Black goes to h6 to develop, to move his knight to f7 to control the e5 square. This happens, and white retreats his bishop, and still controlling e5. Now black managed to get in the e5 push, and I would say he's equalized here. I mean, once black gets rid of the e-pawn, of the backward e-pawn, it's usually quite okay for him. There was another minor piece exchange, and the position really looks roughly equal right now. White would maybe like to prepare some move like c4. Well, immediately it's not possible. I will just take on c4. But what active plan does black have? If he starts advancing his pawns either on the king side or on the queen side, he might weaken his own pawn structure. So I would say this is about equal, and it's not so easy to figure out some constructive plan for either side, which wouldn't involve some real risk. Okay, let's go on to the following match between Slovenia and Italy. Italy are also one of the favorites, but the Italians have already lost 2 matches, just like their girls. They've lost with the Czechs and the Slovaks, and they are a bit behind. I mean, so this is on board 1, and this young Slovenian player Lavrencic is playing against Francisco Sonis, and we have here Rui Lopez, in which there came an exchange. It's not the Berlin with knight f6, but later on white exchanged on f6 anyway, so we'll see how all this happened. Right now he took on c6, dc6, d3. This was actually a line which was introduced, or it was years ago, it was a favorite of Hort and Janza, of Czechoslovakian legend Hort, who passed away a few days ago. Well, the e5 pawn is attacked. The standard way to protect it is knight d7. Queen d6, it's maybe possible, but using a queen to protect a single central pawn, this ties down the queen to the defense, and the queen is such a strong piece, it deserves a better role than just defending a pawn, I would say. So a4, bishop g4, h3, knight a3. Okay, knight c4, knight e5 is a threat, so black protects the pawn. Already he puts his knight on d7. His queen is already on d6, so he wants to put the queen on e6. Can we play something like knight g5 here? Well, yes, we can, but bishop takes g5, queen h5, bishop c1 leads only to exchanges. So white wants more, possibly, and keeps the pieces on the board. Just proceeds with his development. But black's pieces are quite well placed, so I think the position is balanced. Complex position with opposite side castling, of course. This is always a sign of complicated play to come. The question is if white can play b4 now, but he has to be careful about some tactics connected with knight takes e4 and stuff. I will try to make the move, what the computer thinks about it. If this is the right, if this is tactically fine, no, this is not tactically fine, because I can take on e4 on f3, and g takes f3 is queen takes h3. So white has to return the piece back. This is not ideal. This doesn't work. I mean, us older and weaker players, we have to help ourselves a little bit with the current technique. So we'll forget about b4. We'll put it back, and we'll watch what Lavrencic will play. I'm pretty sure he won't play b4. I mean, as a young, promising young player, he is well falling for this. Otherwise black can move his queen away to f6, free the e6 square for the knight. Black's pieces are quite well coordinated. Well, a difficult and complex struggle is ahead. Let's move on to board 2, where we have a queen's gambit exchange with Moroni playing with white against Goroshkov. So let's run over the initial moves. Knight e2. Mostly white currently, when he plays the Carlsbad structure and he exchanges on d5, white tends to play systems with knight e2, relying on playing in the center. I mean, some action with f3, e4 in one game we saw white playing f4 actually. Not so much on the minority attack with rook b1, b4. This is not so dangerous. They have found ways how to counter the advance of the b4 pawn. And actually, when white pushes his pawn to b4, it's more or less double-edged. Black reacts with b5. Okay, c6 pawn is weak, but black is ready to transfer his knight via d7, b6 to c4. To an excellent outpost, which neutralizes the weakness of the pseudo weakness on c6. So okay, what happened here? b5 is also current fashion. He's not even waiting for b4 or anything like that. Black wants to put his bishop to b7, or maybe after a5 even to a6, and to expand on the queen side to advance his queen side pawns. It's of course risky, double-edged. I don't know if black played it ideally in this game. a4. White tries to force some concession on the queen side. And now he wants to control the c5 square. Once black gets to the advanced c5, he can activate his pieces, but it's not so easy. White is unwilling to allow this, and I think he's right. He's at least slightly better. Okay, queen b6 is a computer recommendation. Instead of this, he went for exchanges, and now bishop takes g3. Well, black is not thrilled about exchanging his strong e4 knight, so he exchanges the bishop instead. But still, I will be able to exchange the e4 knight later on. Knight f6, okay, knight b3. Queen c8. I can see black's plan. Queen goes to f5, knight goes to g4, queen goes to h5, and ideally black would try to mate white. But it's a long way off, and I'm not too thrilled with black's chances here. Knight c5 seems like a logical move, and after knight c5, well, I can exchange both black's knights. Knight c5 I can play once, and then after exchanging the knights I can play it the second time, and these c6 and a5 pawns will be vulnerable. I would say knight e5 is a computer recommendation. This also looks quite good for white. So white is better here. I would say white's chances to profit from the exposed queenside pawns are higher than black's chances to launch a successful kingside attack. Okay, let's proceed on to board 4. Here we have already 18 moves at least, a Sicilian. So let's run through the moves. Bishop b5, white avoided an open Sicilian and an Najdorf, and now even didn't play. Now the more popular approach is to play c3 followed by d4, building up mobile pawn center. Black often reacts with d5, and after e5 puts his knight to e4. Okay, this is roughly equal. There are some nuances, but if black knows what he is doing, he should maintain equality. d4 is not considered too dangerous. I mean, here black develops freely. Actually, he could have maybe not prevented. I mean, after rook c8 or something, I'm going to play b3 followed by c4. So c4 is something black can't really prevent in the long run. Queen b3. This is untypical. What does the queen do here? I'm not really too thrilled with this. I would prefer developing, but the problem is black can play queen b4 and the c4 pawn is attacked. I can't protect it with b3, so it makes some sense. And after knight c5, white goes with the queen to c2. Queen b4, b3, everything is protected, and then white proceeds somehow to finish his development. This was probably the idea. Still, I'm not convinced that knight c5 is not possible. Knight c5, queen c2, b3, queen c2, queen b4, b3, maybe I can take on e4. But this moment is long past, so I'm not going to deal with it too closely. Both sides are maneuvering here. Okay, this is a difficult moment. Black allows white to double the pawns and gets a pawn majority on the queen side. On the other hand, black controls the dark squares. If it would be black's move, he would gladly play bishop c5, then centralize the bishop on d4. So white, of course, plays knight a4. But still, to get the queenside majority moving, to get in c5, b4, white has to maneuver a lot, and black has play on the d file. So I'm not so sure this series of exchanges was very good. I mean, even the computer says, controlling the file, I have a better minor piece. The knight is decentralized. It's supporting the c5 push, but the main idea is it's preventing the bishop from coming to c5. Black is better here. Black is better here. This was not a very good idea from Olenik, and Lumaci has a promising position right now. Okay, board 4. Well, we have Nimzo-Indian here. No, a Ragozin. It started as a queen's gambit, d5, knight c3, and now bishop b4. It's a combination of queen's gambit and Nimzo-Indian called the Ragozin defense. Here, the main moves are something like queen a4 check, c takes d5, e takes d5, bishop g5, or bishop g5 immediately. Oh, white played bishop d2. This is also popular in the Nimzo-Indian proper. Currently, castles e3. It's at this point it's quite a popular line. Although, if black knows what he is doing, he should equalize. But okay, it's something rather new, and black players have been struggling with it. For example, now it's interesting to exchange the light square bishops. Black can play bishop a6. Has been played by Carson, actually. Positionally it's sound, but okay, it gives white some tempi, and maybe white can get a slight advantage. Another possible move is rook e8. Then black can also play c5 immediately. The most natural move is bishop b7, which also happened. It's the most played move, but the bishop looks at the d5 pawn. I mean, you develop a bishop on a close diagonal, so there have to be alternatives, and this is not necessarily the ideal continuation. Castles, knight bd7, rook c1. Actually, I like it more to play c5 and knight c6. So I'm not too really thrilled with what black did here. Knight e5. And now f4. And it's not so simple to shake off this pressure of the knight on e5. If, for example, black plays knight e4, white is going to take and then play bishop c4. And the f7 pawn is going to be under pressure. Okay, he played b5, queen f3. Knight b6, bishop e1. That's another idea behind f4. The bishop on d2 is rather passive, but white wants to activate it via h4. Well, black reacts. He chases away the knight and prevents bishop h4, occupies the central square. White plays knight c6. What's going on here? White has won the bishop pair. Although also black has a backward pawn on the c-file, but his knight stands solid on e4, and I don't think this is a clear position. If white would be able to get his knight to e5 quickly, then it's white for choice. But this position doesn't seem clear. So actually black is probably doing quite fine, and he somehow he played the opening in a non-standard fashion, but has managed to solve the opening problems. King h8, king h1, and this is currently the position. So I expect black to play something like rook e8. If he's worried about the a6 pawn, he can play a5 first, and with the knight on e4, black can hardly be worse here. I mean, it's difficult to imagine. Some move like g4, well, g4 weakens also white's king side, not only attacks black's king. So it's double-edged to say the least. Okay, let's proceed to the next match between the second Slovakian team and Team Germany. And here we have the game on board 1 between Doyer and Jablonitsky. Jablonitsky has been playing well lately, and he gained quite a lot of rating, started attacking also GM norms, but in this tournament he's out of form. I mean, until now he has lost all his games. He's playing against nominally stronger opponents, and he doesn't seem to be able to find his form here. But despite this, he chose a very complex opening. He plays the King's Indian, and we have the fianchetto system here. No Grinfeld, no d5. He allows white to play knight c3, preventing d5. Knight c6, castles. Actually, now the most popular move for black is e5, and black is doing quite fine after e5. This older system with a6 has somehow run out of fashion, and Doyer decides to use the older approach, d5 and knight d2 simply. c5, this is directed against b4 of course, and rook b1. b5, and white simply protects the pawn. White's idea is to keep the a5 knight out of play, to somehow hold the position, protect the c4 pawn, and then gradually advance the central pawns. And I think Martin didn't manage to get some serious counterplay here. Okay, he attacks the c4 pawn, but white defends it simply, and quite harmoniously actually, because the knight retreats, and then it can follow up to e3. And now knight e3, queen c7, bishop b2, f6. Well, this is already quite a nasty move to make. It prevents f6, f4, e5, but it's very passive, and now white is really doing well. The knight on a5 is out of play, and white can gradually prepare an advance on the king side in the center. White is better here simply. And the question is only to what extent he's better. So the engine says something like even +2 or so. Well, rook e1. On the b file, all the points where black could invade are protected. I mean, b1, b2, b3, b4, all is protected, so white can even avoid the rook exchange, and he can use his rooks in the center, which is the place where white wants to play. The plan could be also h4, h5 first to soften or weaken black's queen side. If after h4 black plays h5, then e5 will be more powerful, attacking the g6 pawn. So here black is in trouble. Strategically, he's in trouble here. Okay, on board 2 we have a very simplified position already in the game Köleschtevik. So let's go through it quickly. This is the Queen's Indian, but with opposite colors. So white is playing the Queen's Indian. So black just normally develops his pieces, and the position looks pretty much equal, I would say. Well, we have the Queen's Indian proper here, e5. Now, to fight for the initiative, white should play something like c5, bc5, and then take on e5. But still, black takes with the knight, his active pieces, this doubled pawn is not really so weak. I mean, so what he did is he just exchanged pieces in the center. This is excellent for black. White is fighting for a draw here. I mean, the position is equal or drawish, or white can win the pawn back with rook a1, but a draw is the most probable result here after bishop e6 simply. Board 3, we have sharp Sicilian fight here. Once again, the classical Sicilian, the Richter Rouser with bishop g5. This is the classical line. And now h4. So white is not going for f4 or something like that. He's going for the kingside pawn storm. This, as I mentioned, it's the English attack setup. Then g4, then bishop e3, g5. All this happened, and now white even gave half his bishop to win some tempi, attacking black's pieces. Black's bishop, if black would manage to retreat his bishop to g7, it would be really fine for him, but he didn't manage to get in g6 and bishop g7. Okay, here I would say this is complicated, but could be good for white actually. f4, f5, f4, h5, g6. I rather like white's position. I mean, Sicilian is always complex, and one can't say with 100% that this is good for white, fantastic, but I think white is maybe slightly better here. Well, the computer disagrees. Computer values the bishop higher and says that this is nice for black. Okay, but he's going to have to prove his advantage in a sharp struggle. I mean, this bishop f6 is double-edged, but even if it's objectively good for black, then I'm not so sure my move, your move in a sharp fight that white's chances should really be worse here. I mean, on the last board we have Lubomir Vtáčnik, the experienced Slovak grandmaster, playing with white. And also this is also Queen's Indian with white. He also opted for the fianchetto. Am I seeing the same game? Yes, this is practically the same game as Števik against Števik with black, Kölle Števik. So we have same first moves. Here is the difference. c5 has not been played in that game. So black has the hanging pawns, but he has active piece play. And the position, I would say, it's balanced here. Knight e5, rook c7, and this is the current position. Well, it's not so difficult, it's not so easy to see how white can... Knight g4 is a move I would possibly try to play, because supporting the knight with f4 weakens white's king side and weakens the e4 square. It doesn't make much sense here. After knight g4, white has a slightly more pleasant position, but that's about it. I mean, I'm threatening now to take on c5, and after knight g4, queen g4, the threat is again to take on c5, hitting g7. But black can play something like queen e6 maybe, or so, or queen f6, pinning the d4 pawn. There's a struggle ahead. White is slightly better here, but not much more than that. Next match is Hungary against Austria on board 1. Bajdecki has sacrificed the pawn in a Sicilian. This is the Sicilian with bishop b5, the Rossolimo line, so-called. And he didn't take on c6, he retains his bishop. Okay, now black can play also knight f6 in this position. e5 would be a great move if white couldn't play this pawn sacrifice. And this pawn sacrifice, perhaps it's playable for black, but you have to know what you're doing here. I mean, white sacrifices a pawn to get a lead in development and to pin in black's position. The bishop is aiming for d6. Also, potentially white's knight d2, knight c4 is aiming for the d6 square. And black can hardly afford to play something like d5 with this king in the center. So what black tries to do is finish his development first. But now he has to deal with the bishop on d6, which is quite nasty. Rook e8. b4, and now he played queen b6, bishop c4. I'm not too thrilled about black's position. I think he's under quite a lot of pressure here. Perhaps it's not so serious, but still, I mean, in a practical game, and the bishop on c8 is not playing, the rook on a8 is not playing yet, and black has to. Should we sacrifice an exchange with a b5? Well, I think no, because then I'm threatening to take on e7 and on c8 after queen a8. So black is the one who is defending. Actually, this is what the engine says. I should sacrifice the exchange, which leads to an interesting position, and perhaps equalizes. Maybe white should have played bishop c5 instead. But bishop c5 looks like a concession. What about e5? e5 looks maybe more promising. Is this? Nah, I have to reckon with knight f5. So it's not so clear. Perhaps I was too optimistic about white's position. But black must decide. And he must somehow force himself to sacrifice the exchange. Otherwise he's in trouble. His knight on e7 is hanging. So a takes b5 is a critical move, definitely. Now we take on d6, and after bishop b5, and black plays d3, and I'm winning back the material. So this will be equal material. Black will possibly lose the d3 pawn after knight d2, bishop a1, rook a1. But if he finishes his development, he can well equalize. So we're waiting for black. We can wait for black's decision to take on b5. Let's continue and see what's going on board 2. Here we have Ruy Lopez. No, it's an Italian game, but a solid one without bishop c5. Black just developed his bishop to e7 and knight to f6, which is also possible, of course. And here black decided to he weakens the light squares, but okay, he occupies some space on the queen side. This is a typical maneuver. We saw the Chigorin defense in the Ruy Lopez, where black played knight a5 and c5. This is similar. And to fight for the d5 square, white is willing to exchange the knight for the bishop, and now occupies the central outpost. Black would like to exchange the knight with knight e7. For this, he has to retreat with the bishop. I mean, he doesn't want to do it when white can take on f6 and double the pawns on the f file. So this is the reason. Okay, here he is willing to. He's even willing to exchange the queens. I somehow doubt that white has anything more concrete here. I think black should be able to equalize here quite easily. h5. So this bishop on g7 would like to re-enter the play via h6 at some point. Black doesn't want to exchange the bishops. This is his good bishop. I don't know. I mean, I would say the position is roughly equal. White maybe has a slight initiative, but nothing too threatening. I mean, and in the next move he can kick the knight away and it will be forced to return to d5 more or less. So let's go on to board 3, where we have an open Ruy Lopez. Dotzer is a talented young Austrian player. He's about 15 years old, I think, or something like that. Knight takes e4. Bishop e7 is close to Ruy Lopez. Knight takes e4 is the open. Of course, white, this is not really a pawn sacrifice. Black returns the pawn immediately. And this leads to a more complex fight. I mean, more open fight than the closed Ruy Lopez. Here, black has his weaknesses, but has also some piece play and more tactical counter chances. Queen e2 system, which was played by Keres. Knight bd2, c3 are more usual moves actually. But Queen e2 also has its fans. Knight c5. Black is trying to exchange the bishop. And so is white. Now he took castles, knight bd2. Both sides are finishing their development. Bishop f5. Well, as I said, black's pawns can be vulnerable. The a6 pawn requires protection once if white's knight somehow, let's say after b4, knight b3 lands on c5, then black is more than one weak pawn. But for the time being, this is the future, and right now black is piece play. Black is piece play. Black can bother white with his active pieces, and white's advantage is minimum, I think. Queen e3, that's a sound move, and black plays b4 to get some space and play on the queen side. I mean, to stabilize the position, probably white should play something like knight d4. This looks like the most logical move. But this is already, we are already waiting here for white to play. So let's pass on to the last board. Juhas against Balint. Both Hungarian names, and actually both Hungarian players, but one of them is playing for Austria. Well, we still have some traces of the Austro-Hungarian Empire here. And this is an interesting opening. Knight f6, we've had this position. White played d3. This was in the game, I think it was Neugebauer against Vikoke. Here, white went for the sharp line with knight g5. I mentioned this. This is a pawn sacrifice, and b5. Here, the main move is what white played. This is actually bishop f1. But okay, this position is not so clear. White is the pawn up, but the knight on g5 is attacked, and once black gets to finish his development, he will have active pieces and he can have compensation. So white returns the pawn immediately and castles. Now black is behind in development slightly, but he solves it by castling queenside. So we are up for a really sharp fight here. Opposite side castling, f6, knight f3, queen, knight b6, knight a5. And black went queen d5, knight takes c6. This is the current position. Well, of course, black is forced to take on c6. Because queen a7 is a fork on a7. So how are we doing here? What's going on here? Well, it's complicated. I mean, I would say white is slightly better because his king is safer. But okay, black's pieces are active, and it's not going to be so simple to prove it. I mean, takes. Queen e2, queen d3, maybe bishop f4, but all this gives black a chance to finish the development, actually. So maybe simply take. Is this possible? c3. Well, it is possible because after c5 I can play queen f3 or queen c2, and I retain the extra pawn. So this is something which white can actually take the pawn on on d4 after the exchange of the minor pieces. So white's better here. White's better here if he's not afraid of the forcing line after the exchange of the pieces. So I think we've covered all 40 games, and I think we are due in for at least a short break. So I'll say goodbye to you for a short while, take a breather, have a coffee, run off to the toilet, and see you in a few minutes. Okay, so we are back after a rather longer break than we expected. We had some slight technical problems, but hopefully they are over and we can continue with the translation from round 5 from the Mitropa Cup in Slovakia, Trenčín. So, meanwhile, some games have ended already, so we are going to have a look at the ladies once again from the beginning, and I will show you the games which have meanwhile finished. Well, this was from the match Slovakia against the Czech Republic, and we had a look here at the position knight e7. And I was saying the central structure, it depends what happens in the center. And white didn't continue too accurately. Okay, this is still fine. But after queen a5, e3 is a serious blunder. e3 is a blunder because it allows black to play advantageously d takes c4. White should have taken on the e5 with a normal position. Now knight h3, castles, it's about equal. Maybe white is slightly better. e3 wasn't really a very good move. As I said, d takes c4. Now queen takes c4 is knight d5, or or even bishop e6 is even stronger, I guess. Distracting the queen. Queen takes c4. This happened. White shouldn't have taken the pawn, and bishop e6. Bishop e6 is a winning tactic. Now white can't really retreat with the queen and protect the c3 pawn, and the position is just hopeless because black is going to take the rook with check. Now the queen returns. Queen b4, rook d8. And after bishop takes e4, black again has another tactical option, and that's knight c5. And the pawn is pinned, it's a fork, and black is winning. Bishop d6, and here white resigned because after king takes c2, knight takes e6, black is all rook up, and the position is just over. So let's check once again the ladies. Here the tension is already growing. We are deep into the middle game. What we left this position at the moment around move 13. I said the position was about equal, and meanwhile nothing so much has happened in the game. I mean, white was wanted to repeat moves. Now black played knight c7, black declined repetition, but the position remains roughly equal. After some maneuvering and a couple of exchanges, this gave rise to opposite colored bishops, and it's really difficult to formulate some active plan for either side. So I see this game in the critical match of this round on board 1 is heading for a draw, I would say. And here we have the current position after bishop b7. I mean, material is equal, bishops are opposite, but the main diagonals, the long diagonals a1 h8 and h8 a1 are blockaded, so there is not too much perspective for a hard fight. Okay, let's check board 2. Here the tension has been growing. We had the position around move 14, and as I predicted, black really played a5 and she gains the c5 outpost for the knight. But white still remains on top with some more space, and it's not so easy for black to generate counterplay. All these are typical maneuvers. White is trying to safeguard her center, expand on the king side, and black is looking for some piece counterplay. f5 is a double-edged move, I must say, because it gives black the e5 square. So I don't know if I would have played f5. I would have tried somehow to prepare a further advance in the center. But okay, f5 prevents also queen g4, and it increases the pressure on black's king. So black's pieces, despite black having this e5 square, are passive and white is better. But it's still not so easy to break through for white. Montpeur is maneuvering. I don't really like this knight b8. I mean, the knight was on f8. It was on a good square defending g6. I don't like this idea. Now after knight f4, if white plays knight f4, she has a promising attack. The g6 pawn is attacked, and black really doesn't want to exchange the e5 bishop. That's pretty obvious. That's the piece which holds together black's position. So in the last few moves, white has increased her pressure and has an advantage. This is around move 28. So, and she's also an advantage on the clock as well, which is also important. Okay, this is game on board 3, in which white managed to grab a lot of space in the center by advancing the central pawns. And black is really, I would say black is in trouble, because okay, white has doubled pawns on the c file, but black has no way to get on them. Black has no way to attack white's weaknesses, and he's limited by the white pawn chain in the center. Black's pieces are passive. They must retreat with the knights. This is black doesn't have a fortress here. I mean, white can prepare gradually, play on the queen side with a5 advance, as well as she can prepare also g4. This is really a very unpleasant position. So this is the situation currently. White has an advantage. Black, for the time being, it's close. There are all 8 pawns on the board, and black is still holding, but she has difficult defense ahead of her. And okay, this is the last game in which we had this position with some compensation for white. I suggested to move knight b7. Well, instead of that, black defended the c6 pawn, and still she managed to finish the development. But I would say white somehow, she should have played something like b4 or knight d3 to control the c5 square. Okay, now knight d3. I'm not so sure about this e5. I would have probably tried to avoid this. White has a hold on the position, but it's I'm not really sure it's worth a whole pawn. So playing for the attack, queen g5 was a serious threat, but white doesn't have enough material here on the king side. So it's an extra pawn, and extra pawn for black, and white is now only trying to hold the position, to blockade the extra passed pawn on a4, and somehow try to prevent black from converting the extra pawn. But she's definitely not playing for a kingside attack or anything like that. So black is better here. White has still chances to defend, but it will be I suppose it will be a long endgame, and it's black who is the active side here. It's black who is playing for an advantage. So let's go on to the other match. We already saw one decisive game from the match Slovakia-Czech Republic. So let's check board 2. Here we have we stopped here, and I said e3, and I liked white's position. And okay, here now even bishop d3 is quite okay. And bishop e2 is also, I would say, this is slightly better for white. Because in the end, black really had to get rid of the spin, and g5 is really not ideal. I mean, now black's king is weak. f3, knight c6, castles, b5. Of course, black has counterplay here. I mean, maybe castling was not ideal. Maybe some move like h4 is stronger, trying to open the king side immediately. So castling perhaps is not ideal. And now white went for some tactics with e4. Complications. This, if bishop takes e4, then white takes on f6 with the rook, and wins two minor pieces for a rook. This is almost winning for white. So black practically has to take with the knight, and now wins the piece back. Knight f3. Okay, taking on b5 is queen e3 check. This is not ideal. This is dangerous actually for white. So knight f3 instead, and given a chance, white would probably take on g5 to force a draw. I mean, at this moment already, Slovakia had won the game on board 1, so Slovakia are leading in the match, and a draw is not a bad result in a complicated position. But black prevented. Rook g5, material is equal again. Okay, now white threatens queen g6 check. And this is already good for white. White is better here. Queen f5, knight e7. I don't know, the exchange. I don't like the exchange of queens. Here once again I think black has no problems whatsoever. After king e6, preparing knight d5, I would say black is doing fine. Rook c5, she can play rook c8. So again, I would say this endgame is about equal. White can play knight d2 after king e6, knight d2, knight d5, knight takes c4, knight takes c3. White really can't be better here. So okay, this is board 2. What do we have on board 3? Well, we had the position after queen a5. Rook c1 is too passive. I didn't mention this move. I mentioned knight d5, bishop d2, maybe queen b3. Rook d8, this is perfect for black actually. And the point is tactical. Queen a4, I can exchange and I can play b6. Because after knight e5, I will take the knight and play bishop d7. And white loses one piece. So in the end, black will have 2 pieces for a rook, which is of course advantageous for him. This is a double attack. So white realized that she's not going to win material. She retreated with the knight, and now black is okay. Black has no problems whatsoever. I mean, the position is symmetrical. Black is already starting to attack the pawn on c4. And in the end, following this, black actually gained some initiative. This is already slightly more pleasant for black. Oh, it's not such a big deal actually. e6, okay. Now some exchanges. Bishop c3. Black has a nice knight on d4, has no problems whatsoever, but it's still a far cry from a decisive advantage for black. Black has a pleasant position, but not really more than that. So she plays some expansion on the king side now, something like king f7, h6, g5. It's nice for black, but okay, I mean, the game continues. White still retains drawing chances. And let's see what's happening on the last board. Here we had also some wild tactics. Where did we finish? We finished here. Bishop f4, knight a6. Black developed her pieces. Okay, now black has to castle either, otherwise knight d6 check. But okay, this is sort of risky because it invites black to attack the knight on c4 and proceed with the pawns. This should be good for black, of course. f6. I'm not so sure about this move, but still, I mean, this looks promising. a3. Now she sacrifices a piece. ab4, white's going to get mated on the a file. So knight d4, playing for counterplay. g4, takes, knight c5, and now a tactical sequence. Knight e6, king e6, and bishop g2 actually is not very good. White should just simply play d4 or something like that. Knight takes f4 is not a threat right now. It is a threat because I take on f4 with check. So maybe king b1 or move like this. After bishop g2, black can take. This looks a bit surprising. Actually, white might have simply taken the knight and played king b1. This was maybe better, winning the c6 pawn, because queen takes c6. Here black has a tactic. Knight d3, followed cd3, rook c8. And black is not really worse here. Or is she going to be a pawn down? No. I'm going with the rook, and the rook on the a8, not rook ac8, but rook fc8. So now the a5 pawn is protected, and the endgame is equal. And white's advantage has evaporated here in a tactical sequence. After rook e1, black plays something like bishop f8. Black's position is compact, and she's doing okay here. So okay, let's check the other matches. We do have here Italy against Slovenia. In the meanwhile, we had this position around, I think here, yes, around move 14. And I said it's a complex position, but as I see, the experience and higher playing strength of Brunello shows, and in the end she managed to outplay her opponent. This is still an okay position for white. White is better here, but gradually she somehow lost thread. Okay, knight d2 is still quite normal, but white's advantage is not so convincing anymore. Now a pawn sacrifice to keep the queen side closed. The c4 bishop stops white's play on the queen side. Queen d7. She decided to free herself with a4 and e4, undermining the position of the bishop on c4. Rook e8, e3, e5, bishop d3. Already black's a pawn is more dangerous than white's b pawn, because that pawn is blockaded. Black is ready to invade with the rook on e2. So what happened is bishop f4. I don't know if it's ideal. In any case, it loses time, because now white had to retreat. Possibly bishop g4 was better, but then black plays knight g4. So bishop d2, rook e2. Bishop is passive, and suddenly black is the one for choice. Now white is forced to give the b pawn, return the pawn back, and already black has a substantial advantage. Even better possibly was queen f5, with the idea to play knight g4, and then black is threatening to sacrifice on e1, and it's four black pieces against white's king, who is insufficiently defended. So this is a big problem for white. But queen e8 is also okay. And now came sacrifice. Taking on f2 is knight g4, followed by queen e3. This is practically forced mate. But here black has extra material and is winning as well. Knight c3 was the last move. Now white resigned because she can't take the a pawn, and the queen has to fight the a pawn and also defend the king. The knight comes via e2 to f4. well, white's position is collapsing. So this was another game which finished. We had this position at some point like this, I think, around here. I said the position was equal. Well, in meantime, Zimina managed to outplay her opponent. She gained a pawn, and although it takes some work to convert it, white managed to get in e4 to prevent d5. Now the position is more pleasant for white, but that's about it. But I don't know about e6. This weakens black's setup. Knight b5. Attacking the d6 pawn. Black doesn't want to exchange the light squared bishop, so she protected the pawn, and white is playing now. The black's queen on a8 is offside, while white's queen on b2 controls the dark squares. Follow up is knight g4 naturally, h5. White returns with the knight and heads with the knight for g5 at some point, immediately even. So white is pushing here. White is pushing, the d6 pawn is under attack. Now rook e3. Idea, of course, is rook f3. Black can't really take on b5 because rook f7 forces mate. And after rook f8, the d6 pawn falls. So what followed up here? Well, now white took on b7. I would prefer playing c5. Supporting the knight on d6. I really like the strong knight on d6, but perhaps the problem is that black can play knight e8 and exchange it. So white exchange it for the bishop, and white does have an extra pawn, but she retreated with her pieces into a passive position, and this of course complicates the conversion of the advantage, because now the black's knight can go to e6 and potentially to f4 or d4 in the future. And white's bishop is not really such a great piece. So here Zimina gained the pawn. She had big pressure, but somehow with winning the pawn the pressure got lesser, and she made a few inaccurate moves, and already black has chances to fight back. White's advantage is not so big anymore. And let's follow Sedina, who as usual is in time trouble with black. But she has an excellent position. On the other hand, well, we looked at it at this point, and what happened here? Bishop e2. I don't know if that's an ideal move, but after a few moves, black eventually managed to finish her development. I mean, black hasn't castled yet, but this is not such a big problem. The bishop on d2 is passive. White is nothing here, and even more so after the exchange, because now she occupied the c file. This is already more pleasant for black, because black will castle, then put the queen on the c file, the rook on the d file. So black is easy play here. Queen f3. She actually gives, but after after rook c1, black plays bishop a3, rook c2, bishop b4, and the pin on the c file is going to be really very strong and perhaps decisive. So she gave up material, but here black should have a sufficient advantage to win. It's two minor pieces against the rook. It's two minor pieces against the rook, and black has a solid position. Bishop d4. She solidifies her bishop. Then the knight goes to c6. Okay, now it's black to play. The best move is probably bishop e3, transferring the bishop to f4 and freeing the. Yep, she played it. Well, she's got about 1 minute for less than 1 minute for more than 10 moves, but still you have the increment here, 30 seconds per move, and the position is really rather simple to play for black. So I expect black to convert the advantage and win the game. And on the last board already we had this position, and I already predicted that white is going to win, and this is what really happened. After bishop f6, white played bishop a3, took the pawn on d6. White is an exchange up, has a strong central pawn, not an exchange, white is a pawn up only, but after rook e8, rook a3, the strong central pawns decide the game. e5, now knight takes d5 is e takes f6, threatening mate on e8, so this is out of question. White is 2 pawns up at this point. 2 extra pawns and a winning position. Now it's even more than that. It's a piece. Bishop h3, knight c7. And this is the final position. Black is a piece down with absolutely no compensation. So this is how the game ended. We have another game which finished in the match Croatia-Germany. And Croatia won on board 1 after very complicated, after a lot of mutual mistakes. So we had we left it at this position, and queen d2, rook c8. She still is not willing to play bishop e7, and after rook e1 she even played bishop b8, which actually it's inaccurate. I mean, now white should play something like queen d1 and then knight g3. We mentioned actually knight g3 as a good move, but f5 opens the diagonal for the bishop on b8. This is not such a bright idea, and actually gives black's knight a square on g5. I mean, after knight h7, the knight is heading for g5, and already black's pieces are getting active. Black's pieces are getting more space, and e4 is just wrong, probably. c5. d takes c5, bishop c6. A nice pawn sacrifice. Both black's bishops are playing, the e4 knight is attacked. Computer says rook d1 is the best move. White played a very natural move. She took on f6, but okay, this wins a tempo for black. Now your bishop is attacked. Black can also play on the diagonals. Queen d5 might be a threat and stuff like this. So bishop c4 for this reason. Now rook e4 is strong. And black played queen c7. And what happened here, well, knight f4 is pretty much forced. Knight f4, rook e1, bishop takes e1. But she played bishop g3. This looks like a very natural move, but it fails to a rather simple tactic. Rook takes e2. And now white's position breaks apart. Because if you take the queen, then I play rook g2, king h1, I have a discovered check. Winning the queen, I can first take 2 pawns on b2, a2, then take white's queen, it's completely winning. So she took on e2, queen g3. Black has 2 minor pieces for rook, but even more important is that she has a winning attack on the dark squares. So the game didn't last long. Now the white's king is exposed, g2 pawn gets lost, and the final is a mating attack. Rook e8, king d1, bishop f3. White resigned at this point. After king d2 there is bishop f4 check, and also probably also various other really nasty moves. So here Bašulina's position fell apart in the critical phase. On board 2 we had this position from the Caro-Kann, so let's see, we were somewhere here, where still white maybe had a slight advantage to the potential of the bishop pair, but in the end black got the better chances. Okay, black is trying to create some play on the queen side and get an outpost for the knight on d5. This looks actually quite promising for black. I mean, h5, okay, she took on h5. Maybe black can play knight d5 immediately. Taking on g6, okay, I take back with the f-pawn. The double pawn is not such a problem. Here, white has some play on the g file. Rook g1 is a very natural move, maybe with a slight advantage. Bishop f3 instead. Knight d5. I don't like this exchange. This exchange gives away any possible advantage white might have. This is the better of the two bishops white has. She still should play rook, or if she's worried about bishop a3, then king a1 first and then rook g1, but not exchange the light squared bishop, which is a superior minor piece. Okay, now black is okay, fine already. g6. Well, it's dangerous, of course, to give the opponent a passed pawn, but in the end the h6 pawn got lost after a couple of moves. White took the c4 pawn instead, but still, black's pawns are more mobile, and black is better here. I mean, I want to play g4, g3. Okay, white can stop this maybe with queen e2, then I play rook h2. White is rather passive, and this is a position in which white has to defend against black's initiative. So Germany may well equalize here on board 2. And okay, let's follow up with board 3. This is some totally crazy position in which white is winning. We left it at this point, and I said the pawn on e4 is weak, and this was too ambitious from black. And what happened in the game only proves this. The pawn got lost, and white is all the play on the king side, actually. So she opened the king side. Queen f6. Well, principle, this bishop takes f4. And okay, bishop f7, king f7, queen h7, king f6. I don't see an immediate mate. So this is what black, this is what white should, black should have gone for. So perhaps this h5 idea is not the brightest. I mean, I can take another pawn on a4 to be just materialistic. White is 2 pawns up and then somehow manages to consolidate. I return with my queen to c2, then put my king f1, king g2. Well, black still has to show compensation, but she went for a direct attack, and this is not good. I mean, now knight e4, white actually wins an exchange, and black doesn't have sufficient compensation. Well, still, it is quite exciting at this point. Bishop a6, knight c4, some tactics. But the stronger move is bishop a6 immediately, threatening bishop c4, activating another piece. When we sacrifice material, when we look for compensation here for a full exchange, we should try to coordinate and activate as many pieces as possible. So knight c4, yeah, she played bishop a6 on the next move, but it's not as effective. Okay, now still some complications. This is good for black, I think. I mean, knight d4. But knight d4 is a serious mistake. Well, black should take on c5, which is probably good for black. D takes c5 is the right move. Black is only an exchange down, but the next move could be something like rook d8. And black has the initiative. White's king is worse than black's here. Knight d4 is an oversight. Knight d7 check, and white is going to be a rook up. King g7, knight f6. This already happened. After knight c2, white can take on h4, and is a rook and a piece up. So this is a winning position. Rather easily winning, I would say. So Germany is going to win this game. But they lost on board 4. They lost on board 4, in which the German player got outplayed. We had it somewhat earlier. At this point, queen d7. Queen e6. Okay, I don't know if that's ideal. Ef6, computer recommends taking with a piece on f6 with queen f6, but even then white is better after h5. Here white doesn't have to play h5. h5 comes only later, so white improves her pieces first. Okay, now was a good moment for h5. Rook e1 was also a sound move. Bishop b1 is maybe not ideal. Queen g4, hunting some pawns. But the queen on g4 is misplaced. Rook e8, queen d3. Okay, this is dangerous. Mating threat on h7. So queen e4, queen b5, queen e2. Now she chased the queen away, and white has netted herself a nice pawn and has a dominant position. g4, knight h4. It's no improvement. The knight is heading for f5. Check. And rook e8. Well, black tries to defend by exchanging pieces, but white has none of this. Now there are pieces hanging, and the rook remains on d1 to defend white's king. There is no weakness on the basic rank. The a6 knight is hanging. c4. Already queen takes a6, which is pretty much winning, is not enough. She decides to retain the strong bishop, and okay, that's a strong move, because now white takes on d5. Two extra pawns, two strong bishops. Black has more weak pawns. Well, this is decided. Black tried to generate some counterplay, but without too much success. Now she lost a piece, and white has a piece up and is continuing the attack. Knight c7, bishop takes c7, and the rook invades to e8, and the game is over. So bishop takes c7 is the final position. Ladies, continuing with the match, Austria-Hungary. This is board 1. Well, we had the position somewhere here. No, a bit earlier, after c5. I quite liked black's position. Meanwhile, white has done well. I mean, f5 is really slightly dubious. I mean, I wouldn't like to give white a protected passed pawn. I'd like rather to play f6 and exchange the pawn. White can have a passed pawn on e5, but once it's not protected with f4, it could be also weak. But okay, she was relying on this blockade, but it's not easy to see what kind of active play does black have here, because g5 weakens the f5 square. So white continued maneuvering. Here the position is roughly equal, or perhaps even better for white, I think. Nothing much happened. Here, repetition, queen d8, and okay, here they repeated moves and the game ended a draw. The whole match is finished already, actually, because the rest of the Hungarian girls won their games, as I see. On board 3. No, I'm sorry. Lisa Hapala scored for Austria. So we had this position after queen e7, knight d2. Okay, this is a strong move, which I overlooked or underestimated. I'm preventing this d3 followed by e4. Well, black should have taken on e3 and played queen takes c5 simply, which is probably okay. a5 doesn't make so much sense. So maybe this is okay, maybe for white. But what happened was just murder. This, queen takes, queen e8. And now I suspect white should have castled queenside. Queen takes d4, loses time. Castling is unclear. Here white is slightly up on material. He has a rook against two minor pieces and a couple of pawns. Black has some activity, so it's not so clear, but okay, a playable position. Queen d4 gives black a big tempo with knight c6. After queen d5 check is bishop b6, another tempo. Queen c3, f4. And now once again, white should have castled queenside. She went kingside, and here after f3, already white's king is in trouble. e4, knight e5, g takes f3 is a heavy mistake, which loses on the spot after queen h5. Knight takes f3, then bishop h3, queen h3 check after king g2. This is forced mate practically. So she tried to run away with the king, but after bishop f1, it's game over. Rook takes f1 is knight f3, king g2, queen g4, king h1, queen h3, and white must give her queen, which is pretty much hopeless. And this is what happened in the game actually. Well, she didn't continue. I mean, she didn't continue. White gave up at this point. Let's see board 3. We had some game. We had the position at this point, and I said knight c6 is the best move. What happened is cd4, ideal. But white played e4, which is, I mean, why block the diagonal for the bishop? Bishop e3, knight b3. Knight b3 looks promising with the idea knight c5. And then I develop my bishop, put my rook on c1. White has a lead in development, and black still has to somehow finish. She hasn't yet developed her queen side, and white does it more easily than black. But e4, knight c6, obviously. Bishop f1. Well, the bishop was better on g2 when the diagonal was open. Then it's on f1. Knight b3, and black switches the queen to h5, and suddenly starts creating threats like knight g4 and so. Knight d5, knight d5, rook d5, knight b4. It's just a heavy mistake from white, because now after rook h5, she's just an exchange down. But what happened? White lost an exchange for one pawn. e6. a5 was a stronger move. Bishop d2, knight g4, h3. So she's losing some time here. Still, it's very promising, of course, for black. Knight g5, and play knight f3 mate. After queen c6, we play simply rook b6 or rook c8. So what happened is white resigned at this point. So this is equality, and on the last board, Austria won actually. So Austria are leading. I'm sorry, Austria they are not leading. They won the match, in fact. I said that this position is really promising for black, and sure it is. She managed to play actively in the center and exploit her space advantage. Okay, black should have played a4 at some point. I mentioned that. This was maybe not so ideal. a3, but at some point a3 should have happened. Still a3. White is playing only on the queen side, ignoring what's going on the other side. And black now a3, but black already is prepared to develop a huge initiative. White tried to create some counterplay by this operation, but black simply ignores it. b5 blocks the position, knight d8. Okay, white won a pawn, but now black's attack is unstoppable already. f4. Queen e1, king g7. The rook is coming to h8. Queen g5, no queen exchange. Rook f1, rook h8. And already queen takes g3, rook takes h2. The threats are decisive, and this is mate. This is what happened in the game. This is forced mate. King h1, queen takes h3, mates. So this is a match which finished already. And let's get on to the gentleman. I bet we have some finished games as well. Let's get on to the critical match between Slovakia and the Czech Republic. Here we have already one game which ended a draw, And I think, as I said, I think Pechac with black missed some chances here. We had this point, we suggested queen h7 or queen h6. What happened is knight h5. King h1, bishop f5. White is, black is trying to exchange the defensive bishop. And this in the end didn't pass. Knight c5. And black should have kept the bishop. I mean, the engine suggests bishop f5. I retain the bishop, and I'm trying to transfer some major pieces to the h file. White's king is vulnerable, and black should be better here. Knight f6 is perhaps not ideal. Okay, he played it with this idea. Now knight e5 is the logical move. Protecting c6, the knight then heads for d3 at some point. Black then can transfer his rook e6, rook f6 to pressure the f2 pawn. So this is, it still would be, knight e5 would still be promising for black. Black played rook d8 instead, and after queen e1, g5, at this point the game was drawn. Already now white can play f3 to exchange queens. I mean, even if it does lose a pawn or something like that, white is more than happy to achieve this, because with the weaker king, an exchange of queens helps the defense. f3 takes f3, queen takes h4, and if you take on g2, you're going to lose the g4 knight. This is not a problem. So what here white should have played is f3, but he accepted a draw offer, so the game ended at this point after g5. And on board 2 we also had a draw after some big fight and mutual mistakes. Martin Neugebauer missed a chance, as I see here. We had it at this position. White quietly developed his forces, and black was practically forced to sacrifice something. This looks nice for white. cd5, rook a7. Okay, white is a pawn up. Queen c8, knight e3. So black can play something like queen e6, which is probably the best. He's rather desperate to gain some counterplay, so he tried this. Knight takes g5, winning another pawn. Well, black has to do something to complicate the issue. Queen f4. According to the computer, the best move. Now it was white's turn to make a mistake. h4 is the strongest move. h4 is natural because the knight can't retreat, the f7 pawn is hanging. So after h4, what he has to do is to play for some complications like this, but still, I mean, one check, yes, okay, bishop f6, and now I play knight a5. Takes, king f8, I take the knight on g5, and king e7, f3. White's going to be 1 or 2 pawns up and has excellent winning chances. Well, okay, this was move 30, probably short of time. It was not so easy to calculate. Knight f5 is not the brightest idea. Here black improved his queen. h4, knight e6. And after knight d4 here already, he didn't see anything better than forcing a perpetual check. Because the knight on f5 is pinned. If white takes on d4, its queen takes f2. So the perpetual check is there, but nothing more anymore. So I think the Slovak players squandered their chances on the first 2 boards. What is it like on board 3? Well, it looks pretty much equal. We had the position way back after knight e5. I suggested queen c7. What really happened was queen b6, queen f3. So let's go quickly through the following moves. Black has counterplay, but still, I mean, white has managed somehow to retain the pawn on e5. And positionally, white is doing fine. So here white, I would say, is slightly better. Although after, I would say the queen exchange should favor black, as he's the side that's defending. So queen g4 is more natural to retain the queens. He went for the queen swap, which is not so impressive. Improved his pieces and landed a strong knight on d4. But black can challenge this knight in the future with his bishop from b6 somewhere, and it's black's position is solid. It's just tough to break. Okay, slightly passive. It's all slightly passive, but still. Rook c1, king f2. Well, I also have a technical problem here for some reason. I'll have to do something with the broadcast. I'm sorry. We'll have a short break right now. Okay, hopefully the problem has been solved and we're back online and live. And I'll return back to the game on board 3 in the match Slovakia against the Czech Republic, where we had this end game, which I said. Okay. Hopefully the problem has been solved and we're back online and live. And the position is roughly equal at this point. In the match Slovakia against the Czech Republic, where we had this end game, which I said. Okay, hopefully this works. It's roughly equal at this point. Okay, hopefully this works. So we're trying to solve some problems. There's some problem with sound. Hopefully this is possible to be resolved. I think it's okay right now.